Captain Jake Morrison had seen many strange things during his 15 years exploring the galaxy, but nothing quite prepared him for the Zephyrian royal court. The massive crystalline palace floated in the upper atmosphere of Zephyr Prime, its walls shimmering with colors that seemed to shift based on the emotions of those inside. Jake adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform one last time as the shuttle approached the docking bay. This mission was crucial for humanity's expansion into the Outer Rim territories. The Zephyrians controlled 3 key star systems that would provide perfect staging points for human colonies. All he had to do was secure a trade agreement with Queen Zalara, and humanity would have a foothold in this region of space. "Remember, Captain," came the voice of Ambassador Chen through his earpiece, "the Zephyrians are an extremely formal species. Their culture values precision, politeness, and proper protocol above all else. One wrong word could destroy months of negotiations." Jake nodded as he watched the alien docking crew guide his shuttle into position. The Zephyrians were humanoid but distinctly alien, with elongated limbs, translucent blue-tinged skin, and the most striking feature of all, they could change color based on their emotional state. Blue meant calm, green indicated curiosity, yellow showed happiness, and red meant either anger or embarrassment. The shuttle doors hissed open, and Jake was greeted by a delegation of court officials. Their skin was a neutral blue-green, which he took as a good sign. The lead official, a tall figure with intricate silver markings on his forehead, bowed deeply. "Welcome, Captain Morrison of Earth. I am Prime Minister Kethal. Her Majesty Queen Zalara awaits your presence in the Grand Throne Chamber. Please follow the established protocols." Jake had studied Zephyrian customs for weeks. He knew to keep his hands visible, to make eye contact but not stare, and to speak only when spoken to until formally introduced to the Queen. What he hadn't prepared for was the sheer magnificence of the throne room. The chamber was vast, with walls that seemed to stretch into infinity. The floor was made of the same color-changing crystal as the palace exterior, creating patterns that flowed like water beneath their feet. Hundreds of courtiers lined the walls, all maintaining perfect posture and that same neutral blue-green coloring. At the far end of the chamber sat the throne, carved from a single piece of rainbow crystal that caught and refracted light in impossible ways. And upon that throne sat Queen Zalara herself. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The Queen was stunning even by alien standards. She was taller than most Zephyrians, with an elegant bearing that commanded respect. Her skin had a subtle iridescent quality that made it seem like she was lit from within. But what struck Jake most was her eyes, large, intelligent, and currently a warm golden color that spoke of both wisdom and kindness. As Jake approached the throne, following Prime Minister Kethal, he noticed something else about the Queen. Despite her formal posture and regal bearing, there was something almost shy about the way she held herself. Her skin flickered occasionally from blue to a very pale green, suggesting nervousness, Your Majesty, Prime Minister Kethal announced, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "I present Captain Jake Morrison, representative of the human species and the Earth Colonial Alliance." Jake stepped forward and executed what he hoped was a proper Zephyrian bow, a deep forward bend with arms extended to the sides. When he straightened, Queen Zalara was looking directly at him, her skin now showing streaks of yellow curiosity mixed with the blue. "Captain Morrison," her voice was melodic, with an accent that reminded Jake of wind chimes. "Welcome to Zephyr Prime. We have heard much about your species. Your reputation for innovation precedes you, Your Majesty," Jake replied, grateful that his voice remained steady. "It is an honor to stand before you and your magnificent court. I come bearing hopes for a prosperous relationship between our peoples." The Queen's skin brightened slightly, more yellow creeping in. "You speak well, Captain. Tell me, what do you make of our world so far?" This was Jake's moment. He had prepared for this question, ready to compliment their technology, their art, their culture. But as he opened his mouth to deliver his carefully rehearsed response, something made him pause. Maybe it was the way the Queen sat slightly forward, genuinely interested in his answer. Maybe it was the nervous flutter of color across her skin that made her seem more approachable than he had expected. Whatever it was, Jake found himself speaking from the heart, rather than from his diplomatic training. "Your Majesty, everything about Zephyr Prime is breathtaking. Your palace is a wonder of engineering and artistry. Your people carry themselves with such grace and dignity, and if I may be so bold." Jake paused, realizing he was about to step off the script entirely. The queen's skin flickered with more intense yellow, and she leaned forward slightly. "Please, Captain, speak freely." Jake smiled, that easy human charm taking over. "Your Majesty, you have the most magnificent throne room I have ever seen. The way you've designed everything, from the flowing crystal floors to the perfect acoustics, it all serves to frame and highlight the most beautiful feature of all." The entire court seemed to hold its breath. Even Jake wasn't sure where this was going. But something about the Queen's genuine interest made him want to be completely honest rather than diplomatically safe. Queen Zalara's eyes widened slightly, and her skin began to show more complex patterns of color. "And what feature would that be, Captain Morrison?" Jake Morrison had always been told he had a silver tongue, but at this moment, standing before an alien queen in a court full of beings he barely understood, he realized that his charm might be about to get him into serious trouble. The Queen's question hung in the air. "And what feature would that be, Captain Morrison?" Jake looked at Queen Zalara, sitting regally upon her crystal throne, and his brain seemed to short-circuit. Instead of mentioning the architecture or the artistry, instead of complimenting her crown or her jewelry or any of the dozen safe diplomatic answers he should have given, Jake's mouth seemed to work independently of his common sense. "Your throne, Your Majesty. The way it's positioned, the way the light hits it, everything is designed to showcase what is, quite honestly, the most perfectly shaped royal seat I have ever had the privilege to observe." The words were out before Jake fully realized what he had said. In his mind, he had been complimenting the throne itself, the craftsmanship, the way it was designed to present the Queen majestically. But as soon as the words left his mouth, he heard them the way everyone else in the room had just heard them. He had just complimented the Queen's buttocks. In front of her entire court, on a diplomatic mission that could determine humanity's future in this sector of space. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. The Queen's skin, which had been showing pleasant yellows and curious greens, suddenly flashed through a rapid spectrum of colors before settling into the deepest, most vibrant red Jake had ever seen on a Zephyrian. It was the kind of red that seemed to glow with its own inner light. But Queen Zalara wasn't the only one changing colors. Every single courtier in the vast throne room began shifting from their neutral blues and greens to various shades of red, creating a wave of color that rippled outward from the throne like a stone dropped in a pond. Prime Minister Kethal made a sound that might have been a gasp, or might have been something dying. His skin had gone so red it was practically purple. Several of the younger courtiers seemed to be having trouble breathing. Jake stood frozen, his human skin remaining its normal pale pink, which suddenly made him feel like the most alien creature in the room. He was acutely aware that he was probably the only being present who wasn't currently glowing like a beacon. Jake started, then stopped. What could he possibly say? How did one apologize for accidentally complimenting an alien queen's posterior in the middle of formal diplomatic proceedings? Queen Zalara remained perfectly still on her throne, but her color continued to deepen. Jake couldn't tell if she was angry or embarrassed or possibly planning to have him executed. The fact that he couldn't read Zephyrian expressions made everything worse. Then, just as Jake was preparing to offer whatever apology might save his career, and possibly his life, something unexpected happened. The Queen's mouth twitched. It was the smallest movement, barely perceptible. But Jake caught it. For just a moment, the corner of Queen Zalara's mouth curved upward, in what could only be described as the beginning of a smile. The red in her skin flickered, showing brief flashes of yellow before returning to that deep crimson. Jake realized with growing amazement that the Queen wasn't angry. She was embarrassed, yes, but she was also amused. "Captain Morrison?" The Queen's voice was carefully controlled, but Jake could hear something in it that hadn't been there before. "That is quite possibly the most unusual diplomatic compliment ever offered in this court." The courtiers were all staring at Jake now, their red gradually giving way to other colors. Some showed the purple that Jake was learning indicated confusion. Others flickered between red and green in what seemed to be a state of uncertainty. Jake realized this was his moment. He could try to backtrack, make excuses, pretend it was a translation error. Or he could lean into the moment with the same honest charm that had gotten him into this situation in the first place. "Your Majesty," Jake said, his confidence growing as he saw the continued flicker of amusement in the Queen's eyes. I seem to have a talent for speaking before thinking when I'm in the presence of true magnificence. Perhaps this is why humans are better known for their boldness than their diplomacy. This time the Queen definitely smiled. It was quick, there and gone in an instant, but unmistakable. The yellow in her skin grew stronger, beginning to compete with the red. Indeed, Queen Zalara said, and now there was definitely warmth in her voice. We have heard that humans have a tendency toward directness, though perhaps we underestimated just how direct you could be. Jake noticed that Prime Minister Kethel was now a sort of confused purple color and seemed to be questioning everything he thought he knew about diplomatic protocol. Several of the younger courtiers were showing definite green curiosity, and a few were even flickering toward yellow amusement. Your Majesty, Jake said, deciding to take the biggest risk of his career. If I may be permitted to make one more observation? The Queen's eyebrows rose and her skin showed a complex dance of colors. Captain Morrison, after that last observation, I confess I am both terrified and intensely curious about what you might say next. Please proceed. Jake took a deep breath. Your Majesty, in my culture, we have a saying, in for a penny, in for a pound. I believe I may have already committed myself to a path of complete honesty in your presence. So let me say this. Your reaction to my poorly chosen words tells me more about your character than hours of formal speeches ever could. You could have had me arrested or expelled for my diplomatic blunder. Instead, you've shown grace, humor, and genuine curiosity about my species. That, Your Majesty, is the mark of a truly great leader. The throne room had gone completely silent. Even the subtle humming of the crystal architecture seemed to pause. Queen Zalara's skin was now showing the most complex pattern of colors Jake had ever seen on a Zephyrian. Red and yellow and green all swirling together in what looked almost like Aurora Borealis. Finally, the Queen spoke, and when she did, her voice carried a note of genuine laughter. Captain Morrison, you are either the most skillful diplomat I have ever encountered or the most charmingly inept. I find myself unable to determine which, and that is a first in my many years of rule. The formal audience had dissolved into something Jake had never experienced before, an actual conversation with an alien, Queen who seemed genuinely entertained by his complete failure at diplomatic protocol. Queen Zalara had called for a recess, and now Jake found himself in a smaller, more intimate chamber adjacent to the throne room. The walls here were softer, showing gentle blues and greens that responded to the calmer mood. The Queen had dismissed most of her court, leaving only Prime Minister Kethel, who still looked like he was having some kind of existential crisis, and a few senior advisors who were watching Jake like he was a fascinating but potentially dangerous specimen. Captain Morrison, Queen Zalara said, settling into a chair that was thankfully normal-sized rather than throne-like. I must admit that in all my diplomatic briefings about your species, no one mentioned that humans possess such unique approaches to conversation. Jake couldn't help but notice that the Queen's coloring had stabilized into a warm pattern of yellow and green, with only occasional flickers of red. He was beginning to understand that yellow meant she was happy or amused, green indicated curiosity, and red was embarrassment. The combination suggested she was enjoying this unexpected turn of events. Your Majesty, I should probably explain that I'm not actually a trained diplomat, Jake admitted. I'm a starship captain who happens to be good at talking to people, though apparently that skill doesn't translate as well to talking to alien royalty as I'd hoped. Not a diplomat? Prime Minister Kethal finally found his voice, though his skin was still showing confused purples. But the Earth Colonial Alliance sent you to negotiate one of the most important trade agreements in this sector. Jake shrugged, a gesture that seemed to fascinate the Zephyrians present. They sent me because I've successfully made contact with 17 different species, and I have a knack for getting people to trust me. Usually without accidentally commenting on their physical attributes. Queen Zalara laughed, and the sound was like music. Her skin brightened to pure yellow for a moment before settling back into the mixed pattern. Captain, you say accidentally, but I'm curious, was it truly an accident? Or is this perhaps an example of human intuition that our briefings mentioned? Jake considered this carefully. The honest answer was complicated. Your Majesty, here's the thing about humans. We're terrible at hiding what we really think. When something strikes us as beautiful or impressive, we tend to blurt it out. The truth is, when I saw you sitting on that throne, everything about the scene was so perfectly arranged, so regal and magnificent, that I genuinely wanted to compliment what I saw. My brain just chose possibly the worst way to express that thought. So you do think my throne is well designed? The Queen asked, and Jake caught a hint of something in her voice that made him look more carefully at her expression. Your Majesty, that throne is a masterpiece. The way it's positioned to catch the light, the angle that presents you to your court, the way the crystal refracts, colors to complement your natural skin patterns. It's clearly designed by someone who understands both artistry and the psychology of leadership. The Queen's skin brightened significantly. You have a good eye, Captain. I designed it myself. You designed it? Jake couldn't hide his surprise. Your Majesty, you're an artist as well as a ruler? Is that so unusual? Queen Zalara asked, tilting her head in a way that Jake was starting to recognize as a sign of curiosity. Well, no, but... Jake paused, realizing he was about to make another cultural assumption. In human society, leaders are often so busy with governing that they don't have time for artistic pursuits. The fact that you have both the skill and the time to create something that beautiful while ruling an interstellar civilization is genuinely impressive. Prime Minister Kethal cleared his throat, his colors finally returning to something closer to normal. Your Majesty, perhaps we should discuss the trade negotiations that brought Captain Morrison here. But Queen Zalara waved a dismissive hand. Kethal, when was the last time we had a visitor who showed genuine interest in our culture rather than just our resources? Captain Morrison, tell me, what else have you observed about our society that surprises you? Jake realized he was being given an extraordinary opportunity. Most diplomatic meetings were formal, scripted affairs. This felt more like a conversation between equals, and he decided to treat it that way. Your Majesty, the thing that strikes me most is how your emotional transparency through color changes would seem to make deception impossible. Yet you've built one of the most stable governments in this region of space. In human society, much of politics involves hiding true feelings and intentions. How do you make it work when everyone can literally see what you're thinking? The Queen's expression grew thoughtful, and her skin shifted to deeper greens and blues. An excellent question, Captain. The answer is that when deception is impossible, you must build your society on different foundations. We value emotional honesty, clear communication, and genuine consensus. When everyone knows how everyone else feels about a decision, you cannot rule through manipulation or hidden agendas. That's fascinating, Jake said, genuinely intrigued. It explains why your society seems so stable compared to some others we've encountered. But it must make situations like my diplomatic blunder even more significant. There's no way to pretend it didn't happen or that you weren't embarrassed by it. Precisely, Queen Zalara said, and now her skin showed a complex pattern that Jake couldn't quite read. Which brings us to an interesting situation, Captain Morrison. Your comment about my throne has become, shall we say, a notable moment in court history. The question now is what we do about it. Jake felt a flutter of worry. Am I to be expelled from Zephyr Prime, Your Majesty? Oh, quite the opposite, the Queen said, and her skin brightened with unmistakable amusement. Captain, in 300 years of Zephyrian recorded history, no foreign dignitary has ever caused our entire court to simultaneously turn red. You have achieved something unprecedented. Is that good or bad? Jake asked cautiously. Queen Zalara smiled that quick, bright smile again. Captain Morrison, I believe it's about to become the foundation for the most interesting trade negotiations in our planet's history. The formal audience had dissolved into something Jake had never experienced before, an actual conversation with an alien. Queen who seemed genuinely entertained by his complete failure at diplomatic. Protocol. Queen Zalara had called for a recess, and now Jake found himself in a smaller, more intimate chamber adjacent to the throne room. The walls here were softer, showing gentle blues and greens that responded to the calmer mood. The Queen had dismissed most of her court, leaving only Prime Minister Kethal, who still looked like he was having some kind of existential crisis, and a few senior advisors who were watching Jake like he was a fascinating but potentially dangerous specimen. Captain Morrison, Queen Zalara said, settling into a chair that was thankfully normal-sized rather than throne-like. I must admit that in all my diplomatic briefings about your species, no one mentioned that humans possess such unique approaches to conversation. Jake couldn't help but notice that the Queen's coloring had stabilized into a warm pattern of yellow and green, with only occasional flickers of red. He was beginning to understand that yellow meant she was happy or amused, Green indicated curiosity and red was embarrassment. The combination suggested she was enjoying this unexpected turn of events. Your Majesty, I should probably explain that I'm not actually a trained diplomat, Jake admitted. I'm a starship captain who happens to be good at talking to people. Though apparently that skill doesn't translate as well to talking to alien royalty as I had hoped. Not a diplomat. Prime Minister Kethal finally found his voice, though his skin was still showing confused purples. But the Earth Colonial Alliance sent you to negotiate one of the most important trade agreements in this sector. Jake shrugged, a gesture that seemed to fascinate the Zephyrians present. They sent me because I've successfully made contact with 17 different species, and I have a knack for getting people to trust me. Usually without accidentally commenting on their physical attributes. Queen Zalara laughed, and the sound was like music. Her skin brightened to pure yellow for a moment before settling back into the mixed pattern. Captain, you say accidentally, but I'm curious, was it truly an accident? Or is this perhaps an example of human intuition that our briefings mentioned? Jake considered this carefully. The honest answer was complicated. Your Majesty, here's the thing about humans. We're terrible at hiding what we really think. When something strikes us as beautiful or impressive, we tend to blurt it out. The truth is, when I saw you sitting on that throne, everything about the scene was so perfectly arranged, so regal and magnificent, that I genuinely wanted to compliment what I saw. My brain just chose possibly the worst way to express that thought. So you do think my throne is well designed? The Queen asked. And Jake caught a hint of something in her voice that made him look more carefully at her expression. Your Majesty, that throne is a masterpiece. The way it's positioned to catch the light, the angle that presents you to your court, the way the crystal refracts, colors to complement your natural skin patterns. It's clearly designed by someone who understands both artistry and the psychology of leadership. The Queen's skin brightened significantly. You have a good eye, Captain. I designed it myself. You designed it? Jake couldn't hide his surprise. Your Majesty, you're an artist as well as a ruler. Is that so unusual? Queen Zalara asked, tilting her head in a way that Jake was starting to recognize as a sign of curiosity. Well, no, but... Jake paused, realizing he was about to make another cultural assumption. In human society, leaders are often so busy with governing that they don't have time for artistic pursuits. The fact that you have both the skill and the time to create something that beautiful while ruling an interstellar civilization is genuinely impressive. Prime Minister Kethal cleared his throat, his colors finally returning to something closer to normal. Your Majesty, perhaps we should discuss the trade negotiations that brought Captain Morrison here. But Queen Zalara waved a dismissive hand. Kethal, when was the last time we had a visitor who showed genuine interest in our culture, rather than just our resources? Captain Morrison, tell me, what else have you observed about our society that surprises you? Jake realized he was being given an extraordinary opportunity. Most diplomatic meetings were formal, scripted affairs. This felt more like a conversation between equals, and he decided to treat it that way. Your Majesty, the thing that strikes me most is how your emotional transparency through color changes would seem to make deception impossible. Yet you've built one of the most stable governments in this region of space. In human society, much of politics involves hiding true feelings and intentions. How do you make it work when everyone can literally see what you're thinking? The Queen's expression grew thoughtful, and her skin shifted to deeper greens and blues. An excellent question, Captain. The answer is that when deception is impossible, you must build your society on different foundations. We value emotional honesty, clear communication, and genuine consensus. When everyone knows how everyone else feels about a decision, you cannot rule through manipulation or hidden agendas. That's fascinating, Jake said, genuinely intrigued. It explains why your society seems so stable compared to some others we've encountered. But it must make situations like my diplomatic blunder even more significant. There's no way to pretend it didn't happen or that you weren't embarrassed by it. Precisely, Queen Zalara said, and now her skin showed a complex pattern that Jake couldn't quite read. Which brings us to an interesting situation, Captain Morrison. Your comment about my throne has become, shall we say, a notable moment in court history. The question now is what we do about it. Jake felt a flutter of worry. Am I to be expelled from Zephyr Prime, Your Majesty? Oh, quite the opposite, the Queen said, and her skin brightened with unmistakable amusement. Captain, In 300 years of Zephyrian recorded history, no foreign dignitary has ever caused our entire court to simultaneously turn red. You have achieved something unprecedented. Is that good or bad? Jake asked cautiously. Queen Zalara smiled that quick, bright smile again. Captain Morrison, I believe it's about to become the foundation for the most interesting trade negotiations in our planet's history. Jake Morrison had faced down space pirates, negotiated with crystalline beings who communicated through sonic frequencies, and once talked his way out of being sacrificed to a volcano, got on Rigel 7, but nothing had prepared him for the political and personal complexity of Queen Zalara's proposal. He had asked for time to consider her offer, and she had graciously given him 3 days. Those 3 days had been filled with urgent communications with Earth Command, frantic research into Zephyrian marriage customs, and more than a few sleepless nights staring at the alien stars through his guest quarters viewport. The response from Earth had been exactly what Jake had expected. Do whatever it takes to secure the alliance, but remember that you're representing all of humanity. Helpful as always. Now Jake found himself back in Queen Zalara's private garden, having requested this meeting to give her his answer. But as he approached the fountain where they had spoken 3 days earlier, he discovered that the queen was not alone. A tall Zephyrian male stood beside her, his skin showing an aggressive pattern of red and purple that Jake was beginning to recognize as barely controlled anger. This had to be Prince Varric, the cousin who wanted to inherit the throne. Ah, Captain Morrison, Prince Varric said, his voice carrying a tone that made Jake's hand instinctively move toward his sidearm. How convenient. I was just discussing with my dear cousin the absurdity of her latest political maneuver. Queen Zalara's skin showed frustrated blues and determined greens. Varric, I told you this was a private meeting. Nothing about the royal succession is private, Zalara, especially when it involves binding our people to an alliance with these primitive humans. Jake felt his temper flare, but years of diplomatic experience kept his voice level. Prince Varric, I understand you have concerns about any alliance with my species. Perhaps you'd like to share them directly with me rather than discussing them as if I weren't here. Prince Varric turned to face Jake fully, his skin now showing unmistakable hostility. Very well, human. Let me be direct. You are an inferior species from a barely civilized planet. Your technology is crude, your culture is violent, and your presence here is an insult to everything our people have built. Varric. Queen Zalara's skin flashed bright red with anger. That is enough. But Jake held up a hand to stop her. Something about Prince Varric's aggressive posture and dismissive tone reminded him of bullies he had encountered throughout his career. And Jake had learned that the best way to deal with bullies was to face them head-on. Prince Varric, you're right that humans are different from Zephyrians. We don't have color-changing skin to show our emotions. We don't have crystal technology, and we certainly don't have the elegant manners of your court. But you know what we do have? Prince Varric's skin showed mocking purple. Please enlighten me. We have heart, Jake said simply. When we care about something, we'll fight for it against impossible odds. When we make a promise, we keep it even if it costs us everything. And when someone threatens something we value, we don't back down just because the enemy is bigger or stronger or more technologically advanced. Primitive aggression, Prince Varric dismissed. No, Jake replied, stepping closer to the prince. Determination. The kind of determination that built a spacefaring civilization from a single planet in less than 2 centuries. The kind of determination that made us seek out other species for friendship and trade instead of conquest. And the kind of determination that makes us willing to fight alongside our allies when they need us. Queen Zalara was watching this exchange with fascination, her skin showing complex patterns that shifted between worry and hope. Prince Varric laughed, a harsh sound. Fight alongside our allies? Human, you cannot even manage a simple diplomatic meeting without embarrassing yourself and our queen. What makes you think you could be of any use in a real crisis? Jake felt something click into place. This wasn't really about him or even about humanity. This was about Prince Varric challenging Queen Zalara's fitness to rule. And if there was one thing Jake understood, it was how to defend someone he cared about. Wait, when had he started caring about Queen Zalara as more than a diplomatic objective? The realization hit him like a revelation, but he pushed it aside for the moment. Right now, the Queen needed him to prove that an alliance with humanity could work. Prince Varric, Jake said, his voice carrying the authority he used when commanding his ship in battle. You want to know what humans can offer your people? Let me show you. Before anyone could react, Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out his sidearm. Prince Varric immediately shifted to full combat red, his hand moving toward his own weapon. But instead of pointing the gun at the prince, Jake simply held it up for inspection. This is a standard Earth Colonial Alliance sidearm, Jake explained calmly. It fires plasma bolts that can penetrate most known armor types. Range of about 500 meters. Enough stopping power to bring down a charging Rigelian battle beast. Are you threatening me, human? Prince Varric demanded. Jake smiled and did something that made both Zephyrians stare in amazement. He flipped the gun around and held it out to Prince Varric grip first. I'm trusting you, Jake said simply. In human culture, handing someone your weapon is the ultimate gesture of respect and trust. It means you believe they have the honor not to misuse the power you're giving them. Prince Varric stared at the offered weapon, his skin cycling through colors so rapidly it looked like a rainbow. Queen Zilara had gone completely still, her skin showing patterns Jake had never seen before. This is how humans form alliances. Prince Varric, not through superior firepower or political manipulation, but through trust, through the willingness to put ourselves at risk for the sake of those we believe in. Prince Varric slowly reached out and took the weapon, holding it as if it might explode. You would trust someone who has just insulted you and your entire species? You insulted my species, Jake said, but you did it to protect yours. That tells me you're someone who puts his people first, even when it makes him unpopular. That's exactly the kind of person I would want as an ally. For a long moment, the garden was completely silent except for the soft chiming of the crystal flowers. Then Prince Varric very carefully handed the weapon back to Jake. You are either very brave or very foolish, human. Most likely both, Jake admitted, holstering his sidearm. But that's what makes us good allies. We're too stubborn to abandon our friends and too crazy to give up when things get difficult. Prince Varric looked at Queen Zilara, then back at Jake. His skin had shifted to thoughtful blues and greens. Zilara, perhaps this alliance deserves more consideration than I initially gave it. Queen Zilara's skin brightened to pure yellow, and she smiled at Jake with genuine warmth. Captain Morrison, I believe you just passed a test I didn't even know I was giving you. The royal bonding ceremony was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. The great crystal cathedral of Zephyr Prime had been transformed into a space that seemed to exist somewhere between art and architecture. Thousands of Zephyrians filled the floating viewing platforms, their synchronized color changes creating waves of light that flowed through the vast chamber like aurora. Jake stood at the altar wearing formal Zephyrian, ceremonial robes that had been specially designed to complement his human physiology. The fabric was woven with crystalline threads that responded to the emotions of those nearby, meaning that his outfit was currently showing the mixed excitement and nervousness of the entire assembled crowd. Queen Zilara approached down an aisle that seemed to be made of solidified starlight, her own ceremonial gown shifting through every color in the spectrum, but Jake only had eyes for her face. Over the past weeks of preparation, he had come to understand that while this ceremony had begun as political necessity, it had become something much more personal for both of them. The officiating priest was an ancient Zephyrian, whose skin had long ago settled into permanent silver patterns. He spoke in the old ceremonial language, but Jake had learned enough Zephyrian to understand the basic meaning of the vows they were about to exchange. Captain Morrison, the priest intoned, do you pledge to stand with Queen Zilara in all matters of state and personal life, to bring the strength and wisdom of your people to support her reign, and to honor the traditions of Zephyr Prime while maintaining the integrity of your own culture? I do, Jake replied, and his voice carried clearly through the crystal acoustics of the cathedral. Queen Zilara, the priest continued, do you pledge to accept Captain Morrison as your partner in both rule and life, to honor the traditions of his people while maintaining your own, and to work together for the prosperity and peace of both your worlds? I do, Queen Zilara said, and her skin brightened to the most beautiful pattern of gold and white that Jake had ever seen. The priest raised his hands, and the entire cathedral seemed to pulse with light. Then let the bonding be complete, and let all present witness that these two souls from distant worlds are now joined in purpose and in life. What happened next was something that no human had ever experienced before. As Queen Zilara took Jake's hands, her skin began to glow with a soft inner light. Jake felt a strange tingling sensation, and suddenly he could sense the Queen's emotions directly, not through observation or interpretation, but as if they were his own feelings. He could feel her joy, bright and warm like sunshine. He could feel her nervousness about the future, her determination to be worthy of her crown, and underneath it all, a growing affection for him that took his breath away. "Can you feel it?" Queen Zalara whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "I can feel everything," Jake whispered back, amazed. "Is this normal for Zephyrian bonding ceremonies?" "Captain Morrison," the priest said, and there was awe in his ancient voice. "What you are experiencing is unprecedented. The bonding ceremony traditionally creates a symbolic union, but in rare cases, when two beings are truly compatible at the deepest level, it can create an actual emotional link." The congregation had gone completely silent, and Jake realized that every Zephyrian present was now showing the same pattern of amazed silver that marked the priest's skin. "Your Majesty," Prime Minister Kethal called from the front row, his voice shaking. "The prophecy of the Silver Union." Queen Zalara's eyes widened, and through their new connection, Jake felt her shock and sudden understanding. The prophecy says that when a ruler of Zephyr Prime bonds with a soul from the distant stars, and when that bond creates true unity between their minds, it signals the beginning of a new age of prosperity and peace. Jake looked around at the assembled crowd, all of them now showing that same silver pattern. "Your Majesty, I think I'm missing something important here." Queen Zalara smiled, and Jake felt her happiness like warm sunlight. "My dear Captain, it appears that our political marriage has just fulfilled a prophecy that is over 1,000 years old. According to our oldest texts, the ruler who achieves the Silver Union will usher in an era where Zephyr Prime becomes the center of a great alliance spanning multiple star systems." "You mean this was destined?" Jake asked, struggling to process the implications. "Not destined," Queen Zalara corrected, "but possible. The prophecy said that when the right ruler met the right soul from the right distant world, and when their union was based on true understanding and mutual respect, the Silver Union could occur." Through their connection, Jake felt the Queen's wonder and growing realization. She had chosen to pursue the alliance with him based on political necessity and personal attraction, but the universe seemed to have had its own plans. The priest cleared his throat, bringing their attention back to the ceremony. "Your Majesties, there is one more element to complete the ritual. Captain Morrison, as the first non-Zephyrian to achieve the Silver Union with our ruler, you must now choose your title and role in our society." Jake looked at Queen Zalara, feeling through their bond her encouragement and trust in whatever decision he made. He thought about everything that had led to this moment: his embarrassing comment about her throne, their growing friendship, the challenge from Prince Varric, and now this mystical connection that seemed to link their very souls. "Your Honor," Jake said, addressing the priest but speaking loudly enough for the entire assembly to hear, "if I may, I'd like to maintain my rank as captain. Where I come from, being a captain means you're responsible for your ship and your crew, and you'll do whatever it takes to bring them home safe. I think that's exactly what Queen Zalara needs in a partner. Someone who will help her navigate the challenges ahead and make sure all our people, human and Zephyrian alike, reach their destination safely." The crowd erupted in a symphony of color, waves of approval and joy flowing through the cathedral. Queen Zalara squeezed his hands, and Jake felt through their bond that she couldn't have loved his answer more. "Then let it be recorded," the priest declared, "that Captain Jake Morrison of Earth is now bonded to Queen Zalara of Zephyr Prime, and that together they shall guide our people into the age of the Silver Union." As the ceremony concluded and they walked together down the aisle of starlight, Jake marveled at how his simple diplomatic mission had turned into something that would change the course of galactic history. Through their bond, he felt Queen Zalara's matching amazement and her deep satisfaction that, political prophecy aside, she had found someone who truly understood her. "Your Majesty," Jake murmured as they waved to the cheering crowd, "I have to ask, do you think any of this would have happened if I hadn't made that comment about your throne?" Queen Zalara's laughter rang out like music, and her joy flowed through their connection like champagne bubbles. "My dear Captain, I think that embarrassing moment was the most important diplomatic blunder in the history of our species." 6 months after the Silver Union ceremony, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed diplomatic station, orbiting between Earth and Zephyr Prime. Through the massive viewport, he could see ships from a dozen different species docking at the various ports, all coming to join what the galactic media had dubbed the Starlight Alliance. The emotional bond he shared with Queen Zalara had proven to be more than just a ceremonial curiosity. Their mental connection allowed them to coordinate diplomatic efforts with an efficiency that amazed seasoned negotiators from multiple worlds. When Jake was dealing with the practical, military-minded species like the Corvani clans, Zalara could feel through their bond exactly what approach would work best. When she was navigating the complex cultural protocols of species like the ethereal Vistani, Jake's more direct human perspective helped her cut through layers of ceremony to reach genuine understanding. "Captain Morrison," came a familiar voice behind him. Jake turned to see Ambassador Chen, his old handler from Earth Command, approaching with what appeared to be another stack of diplomatic files. "Ambassador," Jake replied with a grin. "Please tell me you're not here with another crisis that requires my particular brand of accidental diplomacy." Chen laughed. "Actually, quite the opposite. I'm here to inform you that the Earth Colonial Alliance has officially designated you as our permanent ambassador to the Starlight Alliance." "Congratulations, Captain. You've just been promoted to the most important diplomatic position humanity has ever created." Jake felt a flutter of pleased surprise from Zalara through their bond. Even though she was currently in meetings 3-star systems away, their connection had proven to work across any distance, which had opened up entirely new possibilities for interstellar cooperation. "I'm honored," Jake said, "but I have to ask, are you sure you want someone who started his diplomatic career by accidentally complimenting an alien queen's backside?" "Jake," Chen said with a serious expression, "that accident has created the most stable multi-species alliance in recorded galactic history. In 6 months, we've prevented 2 border wars, established trade relationships that have increased prosperity across 15 worlds, and created a model for interspecies cooperation that 3 other sectors are trying to replicate." Through the viewport, Jake could see a massive Corvani battleship docking alongside a delicate Vistani crystal vessel, with human freighters and Zephyrian diplomatic cruisers all sharing the same space in perfect harmony. A year ago, such a sight would have been impossible. Besides, Chen continued with a slight smile, "Queen Zalara specifically requested that Earth assign you to this position permanently. Something about needing someone who understands the importance of honest communication and isn't afraid to speak their mind." Jake's communicator chimed, and Queen Zalara's face appeared in holographic form. Her skin was showing the warm gold and green pattern that Jake had learned meant she was happy and excited about something. "My dear Captain," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the vast distance, "I have excellent news. The Rigelian Council has just voted to join the Starlight Alliance, and the Andromedan Trade Consortium wants to send a delegation to discuss partnership agreements." "That's wonderful," Jake replied, feeling her excitement echo through their bond. "But what about the territorial dispute between the Corvani and the Centauri Republic? Any progress there?" "Actually, that's the best part," Zalara said, her colors brightening further. "Your suggestion to have them compete in athletic contests instead of military skirmishes has worked brilliantly. They're so focused on trying to prove their superiority in various sports that they've completely forgotten what they were fighting about in the first place." Ambassador Chen shook his head in amazement. Only humans would solve an interstellar war by introducing competitive sports. "It works because it channels their aggression into something productive," Jake explained. "Plus, the spectacle is great for tourism. Half the galaxy wants to come watch Corvani Gravity Ball Championships now." Queen Zalara's hologram shimmered as she adjusted the connection. "Jake, there's something else. The Galactic Council has officially recognized the Starlight Alliance as a stabilizing force in this region of space. They want to discuss expanding our model to other sectors." Jake felt his breath catch. When he had first set foot on Zephyr Prime, his mission had been to secure a simple trade agreement for 3-star systems. Now they were talking about reshaping galactic politics. "Your Majesty, are we ready for that kind of expansion? With you as our permanent ambassador?" "I believe we're ready for anything." Zalara's expression grew softer, more personal. "Jake, the prophecy spoke of an age of prosperity and peace, but it didn't mention that it would also be an age of constant adventure and impossible challenges. Are you prepared for a lifetime of accidentally revolutionizing galactic diplomacy? Jake looked out at the bustling station, with beings from dozens of worlds working together in harmony. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from an embarrassing comment about a throne to a mystical union that had changed the course of history. He felt Zalara's love and confidence flowing through their bond, along with her excitement about the future they would build together. "Your Majesty," Jake said with a grin, "I've learned that the best diplomatic solutions usually come from the most unexpected places. If the universe wants us to accidentally revolutionize galactic politics, then I say we should do it in style." Queen Zalara's laughter rang out from the hologram, bright and musical. "My dear Captain, I couldn't agree more. After all, we've already proven that sometimes the most important alliances begin with the most embarrassing mistakes." As Jake watched a group of human children playing with young Zephyrians in the station's central plaza, their different skin colors creating a living rainbow of friendship, he realized that this was what humanity brought to the galaxy. Not just technology or military strength, but the ability to find connection and understanding in the most unlikely circumstances. His communicator chimed again, this time with an urgent message from the Outer Rim. Another diplomatic crisis, another impossible situation that would require careful navigation, and probably a fair amount of human stubbornness to resolve. Jake Morrison, former Starship captain and current ambassador to the most successful interstellar alliance in galactic history, smiled as he prepared to head off to his next adventure. After all, someone had to keep the peace in a galaxy full of different species, competing interests and the occasional diplomatic disaster. And as Queen Zalara had learned, sometimes the best person for that job was someone who had already proven that even the most embarrassing mistakes could lead to the most extraordinary results. Through their bond, he felt her warm agreement and shared anticipation of whatever impossible challenge they would face next. Together, they had shown the galaxy that true partnership between different species wasn't just possible. It was the key to a future brighter than any of them had dared to imagine.